Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial, and we are on the state's case, part 6. We're going to go over Avrille Krom's testimony today. Unfortunately, I'm still feeling under the weather. I am recovering from the flu, and it's been rough in my house the last week or so with my boyfriend getting it, and then I got it, and it's been knocked us on our butts. But anyways, so I'm still recovering. So this is gonna be a shorter episode, unfortunately, just because I can't sit through a whole long reading just yet. But we are reading through the transcript of the trial. We unfortunately don't have camera in this, so we are reading through the transcripts. You can see in the link below or in the description below, there is a link, and you can find links to the transcripts, the trial transcripts, and also I've created, whoops, already had it open. I created a spreadsheet that you guys can always go back to and see where we're at, just to go over who is representing who, because we have all new attorneys with the exception of Leslie Abramson. So for the people of California, we have Gil Garcetti, who is the DA. He was also the DA for OJ, just FYI. Also, Carol Nahara and David Kahn. We actually don't hear from Gil. So far, we haven't heard from Gil. We've only been hearing from Carol and David. For Lyle Menendez, we have Michael Judge, who we also haven't heard from, but we've been hearing from Charles Gessler and Terry Towery. For Erik Menendez, we've got Leslie Abramson and Barry Levin. And then we still have Stanley Weisberg presiding over this trial. He presided over trial 1 as well. We are on week 2, and we're going to be reading through, like I said, it's going to be a shorter episode, but we're going to be reading through Avrille Krom's testimony. She is the neighbor, which I totally spelled wrong. She's the neighbor who heard the gunshots, and that's who we're going to be hearing from today. So let us get started. Please hit that like button if you don't mind. It helps the algorithm. And let's begin. So Avrille Krom is called as a witness by the people, was sworn in, and testifies as follows. Clerk had her raise her hand, and here we go. Direct examination. Ms. Nahara is asking the questions, and she starts out by saying, Ms. Krom, have you testified previously in the matter of People versus Lyle and Erik Menendez? Yes. And what? And was this on July 30th, 1993? Yeah. I'm not sure of the date, but that sounds right. But you recall that you testified previously? Yes. And on August 20th, 1989, did you live in the proximity of 722 North Elm Street? Yes. This is the city of Beverly Hills? Yes. And where did you live in relation to 722 North Elm Street? I live at 718 North Elm, which is next door, but there's one house in between. Is it on the same side of the street as 722 North Elm? Yes. Are there any houses in between? One. She just said that. Are you listening, Ms. Nahara? Ms. Nahara says, Your Honor, I have a photograph which I've shown to the defense. I would like it marked next in order, which I believe is 84. It has not been marked previously. The court says, all right. Ms. Nahara continues, Ms. Krom, showing you what's been marked 84 for identification, I'd ask you to look at the picture and tell me. Okay. From that picture, do you recognize your house anywhere on that picture? Yes. Could you put a little X with this blue marker that I'm handing you where your home is? And the witness does it. Can you identify the Menendez home in that picture? Yes. Would you put an X hyphen 1 where the Menendez home is? The witness complies. Thank you. Now, sometime around or the night of August 20th, 1989. Were you at home? Yes. And is there a pointer up there? The court says, why don't you go up there and look and see, Ms. Nahara? Why don't you see? Ma'am, you can stay where you are. Ms. Nahara says, Your Honor, may I ask the witness to step down? He says, okay. And she says, thank you. Okay. I'm going to hand you this pointer and I'm going to call your attention to what's been marked Exhibit 84. Can you show the jury where your home is on Exhibit 84? And she points to it. Pointing to the area of the X's? Yes. Can you show us in that picture where the Menendez home is? And she points, and that's where you've marked X-1? Yes. And approximately at 10 in the evening on Mr. Levin, objection leading, Your Honor, sustained. Were you home in the evening of August 20th, 1989? Mr. Levine says, Your Honor, I would ask that the prosecutor return to the podium. And the court says, is she going to be referring to this diagram? Ms. Nahara says, yes, Your Honor. On that evening, where were you in your home at approximately 10? I was in my bedroom. Can you show us where on that picture that would be? My bedroom is in the back right here. Ms. Nahara says, Your Honor, indicating for the record the back where there appears to be part of the house and the pool. The witness says, I'm sorry, I was not in the guest house. I was in the back of my bedroom is back here. Ms. Nahara says, okay, that's right. Before the pool, is that right? Right. Indicating for the record that would be in the area right before the pool? Yes. Thank you. You can sit down. Now, did you hear a noise that attracted your attention that night? Yes. And at approximately what time did you hear that noise? Around 10:20? Between 10:10 and 10:20. Were you alone at the time or were you with anyone? I was with my son. And did you have any other children at home at the time? My daughter was in her bedroom, which was in the front of the house. And was your daughter there all night or did she leave at some time? She left. About how long after you heard the sound did your daughter leave? There wasn't a long time period. Do you recall about what time your daughter left your house? I think it was more or less the same time within a 10-minute span. So about what time do you think your daughter left your home? Do you know, it's been a while and I'm not terribly sure. I think it was around 10:10 or 10. And is that about the time that you heard the sound? No, I heard the sound like at 10:20. And do you recall testifying previously in this matter? Yes. And do you recall testifying previously in this matter that you heard the sounds about 10:10? It may have been that, yes. Remember, this is now 1996 and the crimes happened in 89, so it's a long time later and she's got to remember this stuff, as do all the witnesses here. All right, so she says it may have been yes. And now, can you describe for the jury what it was that you heard? Well, it was a series of popping sounds. And when you say a series, can you describe it just a little bit more detail? Approximately how many? It sounded like definitely more than six, might have been 10, 12. And did you hear them all at the same time or did you hear them in? No. There was a time lag and I thought it was Chinese firecrackers because I heard a series of shots and then there was a time lag and then there was another series of shots. And the reason that I thought it was Chinese firecrackers is because the way that I'm used to it is that the fuse runs all the way across and they pop and then it takes time for the flame to go down the string, excuse me, and then it knocks the next row. That's what I thought. It was Chinese firecrackers. So your understanding of Chinese firecrackers pop and then it takes a little time and it pops again? Yes. Is that what it sounded like to you? Yes. And was your son present when you heard this? Yes. And did you have a conversation about these sounds that you heard? Yes, he went to the phone. Mr. Levin says, objection, hearsay, if it's going to elicit that. The court says your answer was yes, the rest will be non responsive. Your next question, please. Ms. Nahara says, did you call the police when you heard these sounds, the poppings? No, my son picked up the phone and dialed 911 and wouldn't let him call because I said it was I wouldn't let him call because I said it was ridiculous. It was Chinese firecrackers. Hmm, that's interesting. Um, when your son dialed 911, did you the call, I take it, didn't go through or you didn't make the call? Mr. Levin says objection calls for speculation. The witness says I put the court says objection sustained. The answer is stricken. Ms. Nahir says what happened when your son picked up the phone to dial 911? Mr. Levin says objection hearsay. The court says overruled. The witness says I put the receiver down. Ms. Nahir says, did you say anything at that point? Objection, hearsay, overruled. I said to him, why are you calling the police? So he said, they're gunshots. So I said, but it's not gunshots. He said, well, what else would it be? So I said, Chinese firecrackers. And he said, in August? And I said, yes, someone found them left over from July 4th and let them off. I mean, happens in my neighborhood all the time. Like all summer long, people shoot off fireworks. So I wouldn't think anything of it. So he said, Mom, you're being silly. That's not Chinese firecrackers, that's gunshots. Was that pretty much the end of the conversation? That was it, yes. And so did anyone from the house call the police that night? No. At some point that night, did you talk to the police? No, not that night. How about the next morning? Yes. And did you tell them about the sound that you heard? I didn't put the two together until the detective said, did you not see or hear anything? And then I saw my son's reaction and I realized what we heard were actually gunshots, not the firecrackers that I thought they were. Did you mention this to the police the next morning? Yes. When you described it to the police, how did you describe what it was you heard? It was a series of popping and then the time lag, and then another series of popping. Now, did you explain to the police about the time lag that morning or at a later time? I don't remember quite honestly if it was at that time or at a later time, but I definitely did tell them. And as you sit here now, do you believe that this was probably between 10 and 10:20? Yes. Ms. Nahara, thank you, ma'am. Nothing further. The witness says, thank you. The court says, cross. Mr. Levin says, I have a couple questions. He says, good morning. She says, hello or hi. And he says, do you still live there at 718 North Elm? She says, yes. That's a White House? Yes. Couple doors down. And the house next door to yours, between your house and the Menendez house, does someone live there? Yes. Would you describe your neighborhood as fairly heavily populated? A lot of people live in houses that are pretty close together? Yes. And do you remember back in August the 20th, was it a warm night? Yes. Did you have your windows open? Yes. Now, do you remember what you were doing when you first heard these noises? Yes. And what was that? I was actually talking to my son. There was a commercial on, and he was watching something on about an airplane crash that night, and then the commercials came on and we were talking. Were you watching television with him? No, not really. Do you remember if this commercial came on just at the end of a program? I think it was in the middle of a program. And you don't remember what it was about the program? Yes, it was about an airplane crash, I think. I mean, do you remember what it was? Was it a news broadcast or was it a show? No, I wasn't watching. He was watching, but I wasn't watching. The court says, how old is your son or How old was he then? The witness says he was 12 at the time. Mr. Levin says, "Were you wearing a watch? Do you remember?" She says, "Yeah, but I have a watch. My VCR has a clock timer right underneath the TV." And when you gave the time to the police, was that a time estimate? I was pretty conscious of the time because my daughter had to be home by quarter to 11, and her boyfriend or a friend, a male friend of hers, was coming to pick her up or had just come to pick her up at that point. Okay. Do you remember testifying in the last trial that you said your daughter Jennifer had to be back by 10:30? I remember it was pretty, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 10:30 or 10:45 because she was negotiating the time with me. Okay, so your time's maybe 10, 15 minutes off. Yeah, not more than that. And these noises that you heard that could have been at 10, is that correct? No, I don't believe that they would have been at 10 because the friend that was picking her up was running late. That was that was where the discrepancy came in because she said, "Could I stay a little bit longer?" And I said, "No, I want you back at 10:30." And we changed it to a quarter to 11, kind of negotiating the time. When you were asked by the police the time that you heard these shots or these noises, you initially said sometime between 10 and 10:15, correct? I may have said that. All right. And were you estimating the time? As far as the time that you heard these noises, you were giving a time estimate. Is that correct? Yes. Now, do you know the Menendezes, the family? No. Have you ever had any contact with Jose or Kitty or Lyle or Erik Menendez? No. Do you remember a flyer coming around? Yes. And when was that flyer passed around? Ms. Nahara says, "Objection, irrelevant." The court overrules that and says, "You can answer that." The witness says, "It was a few months. It's been so long that I think it was a few months prior to this." Mr. Levin continues, "Did this flyer have something to do with the Menendez family?" "Somebody in the house was giving tennis lessons, and I suggested to my kids to go take tennis lessons there." "Was it Lyle and Erik giving lessons?" Objection, hearsay. The court says, "Do you know who it was who?" And the witness says, "I don't know. I don't." Mr. Levin continues, "I want to ask you some questions about the sounds that you heard. You said you were in the back room of the main house?" "Yes." "And you were there with your son?" "Yes." "And you first heard the noises. Did it sound to you like they were firecrackers?" "Yes." "And did it sound to you like it was firecrackers because the sounds were very rapid in succession?" "Yes." "I take it you weren't counting them as you heard them, just sounded like a lot of firecrackers." "Yes." "And then you heard some kind of pause, which you felt was the fuse burning to the other side of the firecrackers?" "Yes." "And then you heard some more?" "How much time would you say was between the first sound of popping noises to the second sound of popping noises?" I don't know. I didn't ever really think about it. I don't know." "Was it just a few seconds?" "No, it was more than a few seconds." "But was it consistent with your idea that it was a fuse that was burning, blow off some firecrackers, turns over, and then goes off again?" "Yes, it was. I didn't think of it being anything other than that. It was incomprehensible for me to think of anything else." Now, when was the first time you were asked to describe the sounds that you heard? "The next day." "Where was that?" "At my house." "And the police came to your house?" "Yes." "Do you remember which police detective came to your house?" "Oh, no." "Did he hand you a card?" "Yes." "Does the name Edmonds ring a bell?" "I spoke to a lot of people that day. I don't remember who." When you were you interviewed in the presence of your son? Yes. What's your son's name? Joshua. Did you hear Joshua tell the police that he heard the noises at 10? Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object to anything her son might have said to the police. Sustained. Mr. Levin says, did you hear Joshua talking to the police as well as you? Yes. And when you talked to the police, how did you describe at that time the noises that you heard? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Yes. Did you describe the noises that you heard when you were first contacted by the police as hearing what you thought to be sounded like 6 shots? Yes. And you didn't say anything at the time about any kind of time lag, did you? I'm sure I did. Do you remember what you said about a time lag? What I had told you. Okay, you believe that what you just said here is what you told the police. Yes. How many shots would you say that you heard totally if you're thinking now that they're shots? I wasn't counting, but it was quite a number. Okay, your home was a West Tech security sign in front of it? Yes. Is that a private security patrol that patrols your neighborhood? It doesn't patrol, but we're hooked up to a single system. And the West Tech people is a private company an that is online with you to have some kind of security system within the house? Yes. And also have patrol security that come by and check your house? I'm not aware of that, but they may. Mr. Levin says, okay, thank you. Just one moment. The attorneys confer. Mr. Levin continues, your daughter Jennifer, she was home when these sounds took place? She was not in the room with us. I don't remember if she had. I think she might have. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if she had left or was about to leave at that point. All I know is that I was watching the clock because I wanted her back already. Okay, now when did she get back? She's a pretty good kid. She came back when she was supposed to. At about 10:30? You know what? I think it was 10:30 or 10:45. Yes. You're not sure now. Because of the negotiation of the time period, I'm more inclined to think that I prevailed and that she was back by around 10:30. All right. And the telephone call that your son started to make to 911, the sounds that you heard, all that occurred before Jennifer left the house. Yes. Do you have any idea how long before she left the house? No. Could it have been 10, 15 minutes before she left? No. I'm not my memory is not good as far as the time goes, exact pinpointing it because of the length of time that it's been since then. But you are sure you wanted Jennifer back by 10:30? Yes. Mr. Levin says, thank you. Nothing further. The court says, how old is your daughter at the time? Witness says she was 15. She was 15 and you gave her such a late curfew? I mean, that's pretty generous of that mother. All right. The court says, oh, okay, all right. Anything else? Ms. Nahara says, yes, Your Honor. Now we've got some redirect examination. In response to Mr. Levin's last question, you were saying that you thought that Jennifer had already left the house when you heard the sounds, or she hadn't left the house. Now, I think she had already left. She had already left the house when you heard the shots? Yeah. And with regards to these Chinese firecrackers, your concept of these Chinese firecrackers are the firecrackers that come on the string with a roll of firecrackers on either side. I'm not sure what you're describing, but the ones that I know, because I've not seen them in this country, there's a long, they're all attached together, a lot of little crackers. And then there's a string, and then there's another row. So the time between the first series of pops and the second series of pops, what has what has to happen in that time period? The flame has to go down the string. Sometimes it moves more quickly than others. Some of them it's slower and then it starts again. Do you recall how long the time was in this particular instance when you heard the sounds? It was one of the ones that took longer to go down. Now, Mr. Levin talked about you were in the back. Okay. Mr. Levin talked about how you were in the back of the house. Is that correct? Yes. Your Honor, I have another photograph which I'd like marked Peoples 85 for identification. The court says yes. Ms. Nahara says, Ms. Krom, showing you Peoples 85. Why don't you take a look at that? Now, does that show Peoples 85 shows another view of your house? Yes. Does it show where you were in your house on August 20th, 1989? I can show you. Its depiction on this photograph? Yes. Can you put a circle around that? The witness complies. Now, Ms. Krom, I'm going to hand you the pointer. Can you show the jury where on the photograph you just drew that circle? She points and says right there. And that's my bedroom. Okay. You can sit back down now. Ms. Krom, had you ever heard gunshots fired in that Beverly Hills neighborhood before? No. And is that the reason why you did not think that there were gunshots that you heard? Mr. Levin says objection, calls for speculation. The court says overruled on that ground. The answer will stand. The witness says, I think so. Ms. Nahara says, and with regard to how populated this area is, did these houses sit close, some of them with pools and tennis courts, or both? Yes. Are these regular large lots? Yes. Do many of these homes have central air conditioning? Objection would call for speculation unless had personal knowledge. Court says sustained. Ms. Nahara says nothing further. And the court says anything else. Mr. Levin gets up for cross-examination. Or this is actually recross, rather. So Mr. Levin says, Ms. Krom, I would like to read to you some questions and answers that were asked of you and answers you gave from the last trial and ask you if you remember them, okay? You do remember testifying at the last trial? Yes. Do you think your memory was a little bit fresher of these events back when you testified? Oh, I'm sure it was. All right, did you read anything today before you testified? No. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I'm referring to page 7194 and 7195, specifically line 16 and continuing on 7195 to line 14. Ms. Nahara says, excuse me, 7194 line 14, the question, the 7194 line to line 14, whatever they're talking about. Okay. Question. Ms. Nahara says, may I have a moment? And there's a pause in proceedings. Ms. Nahara says, okay. Mr. Levin continues reading. Question. Now, when you heard the sound, did you look at the clock? Answer. Not specifically at that time, but I had been watching the clock all the time because I wanted my daughter back in the house and her friend, was late to pick her up. Question. So at that time you heard the sounds. Had your daughter left yet? No, not yet. Do you recall looking Question, do you recall looking at the clock when your daughter left? Answer, yes. Question, and what time was it when your daughter left? Answer, I think it was around 10:20, 10:17, 10:20, somewhere around there. Question, so it would be correct then to say that you heard these sounds before your daughter left? Answer, yes. Question, at 10:20? Answer, yes. Question, and can you tell us about how long before your daughter left that you heard the sounds? Answer, a minimum of 20 minutes. Probably 10. If you asked me to get more specific, I would say 10 minutes. I think it was around 10:10, somewhere around there. Do you recall that testimony? Yes. And is that a clearer recollection of the events that perhaps you have today? Absolutely. A little more accurate. Yes. You're in real estate, are you not? Yes. So you're familiar with the lot sizes in that area? Yes. Do the homes tend or the lots tend to get larger as you move in another particular direction? North. As you go north, they are getting bigger. And which direction is the Menendez home? North. Mr. Levin says, thank you. I have nothing further. Mr. Gessler says, I have a couple of questions, Your Honor. Why is he now asking the questions instead of the female? Um, I don't know. They switched lawyers all of a sudden. So now there is a, oh no, sorry, Gessler is Lyle's guy. It's hard to remember because he doesn't speak up a whole lot. So that's Lyle's attorney, Mr. Gessler. He says, may I approach? Court says yes. Now we're doing some recross examination with Mr. Gessler. So Lyle's attorney. So before we just heard Eric's attorneys. Now we've got Lyle. Mr. Gessler says, Ms. Krom, would you step down for just a moment and show us again on the new picture the prosecutor has put up, Exhibit 85, where your house is? Is that where the circle is there? She points. And again, the Menendez home. She points. And there's one home in between yours and the Menendez home? Yes. And that's also shown on Exhibit 84. Could you point to where that is? And she does. Thank you. You can sit down again if you want. Sort of like an aerobic class at times. Now, the lot size here, there's a 90-foot lot, isn't it? Yes. That's what your lot is, and approximately what the next lot over is, the one between you and the Menendezes? Right. And then the set off between your property line and the neighbor's property line, that's 15, 20 feet in that area, isn't it? Roughly. Mr. Gessler says, thank you very much. The witnesses, thank you. The court says, anything else? Ms. Nahara says, not from the people, Your Honor. The court says, all right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused. Your next witness, Mr. Khan says, thank you, Your Honor. The people call Perry Berman. And I am going to, I guess I will continue on for a little longer. Because this is so far, we've only gone a half hour. I can go a little bit longer, I'll say. We won't get through all of Perry Berman's testimony, obviously, but let's get through a little bit of his direct. So, the court says, any objection to Ms. Krom remaining? Ms. Nahara says, no objection from the people. No objection, Your Honor. I guess she stayed in the courtroom to watch. The court says, is the witness coming? Ms. Nahara says, yes, Your Honor, he is temporarily indisposed. He is here. Court says, all right, here he comes. All right, step forward, please. Harry Scott Berman, called as a witness by the people, was sworn and testified as follows. If you recall, Perry Berman is the tennis coach of the brothers and a friend, and he was also used kind of by the brothers as an alibi, but never actually met up with him. So he's not actually an alibi, but they were trying to use him as one. So he's called as a witness. The clerk makes him raise his hand. He swears himself in. Okay. Ms. Nahara asks the questions. Mr. Berman, are you acquainted with the Menendez family? I am. And when did you first meet them? In the fall of 1985. And where was this? At the East Brunswick Racket Club in East Brunswick, New Jersey. That was hard to say for some reason. At some point, did you come to Los Angeles? Yes. And when was that? That was in September of 87. And at some point, did you become acquainted with the Menendezes out here in California? That's correct. When was that? I believe it was August of 1988. And at that time, were you acquainted with the defendant, Lyle Menendez? Yes. And how were you acquainted with him? Through tennis, basically. I was a tennis instructor at the East Brunswick Racket Club, and I was training Erik Menendez, and I would also get together and play tennis with Lyle as well. Now, I'm talking about here in California. Oh, I'm sorry. How were you acquainted with the defendant, Lyle Menendez? I contacted them. I called their old tennis instructor back in New Jersey, Brad Warner, and he gave me their number in Calabasas, and I called Lyle and we got together back in August. And what was your relationship with Lyle Menendez from August of 88 to the present, or actually to August of 89? Can you repeat that question? What was your relationship with the defendant, Lyle Menendez, from August of 88 when you became reacquainted with him in California to August of 89? We would play tennis. We would go out to dinner. I would have dinner over at the Menendez home. We'd go to a movie every now and then. And how would you describe your friendship with him? We had a good friendship. I mean, I didn't know. Or, I mean, I don't know. How do you want me to elaborate on that? Would you say that you were good friends, or would you say that you were or were not best friends? How would you describe it? We were good friends. I wouldn't say we were best friends. Is it fair to say that you never discussed emotional issues? That's correct. And did you have a relationship with the defendant, Erik Menendez? Yes. And how would you describe that? I would see Erik occasionally over at the house. We really didn't get together too often because of the age difference, and Erik was finishing up his senior year of high school, so I would spend more time with Lyle. Now, calling your attention to the early part of the year 1989. At that time, did was the defendant Lyle Menendez at Princeton University? Yes. And how often did you see him from the beginning of 1989 to June of 1989, the beginning of summer? Occasionally, I mean, when he was in town, when he'd come back to Beverly Hills, we would get together again, for dinner or play some tennis or go out to a movie. I would say maybe once a month, possibly. If he came in town for an extended period of time, we might see each other a couple of times during the course of 2 weeks or whatever. Now, during that, I believe the spring semester, how often did the defendant Lyle Menendez come back from Princeton University? I can't say. I don't know. I can't say exactly how often. Would you say once a month or more than once a month? Possibly once a month. And then later in the spring, when he started dating someone who lived out here, he came back a little more often. By more often, would you say twice a month or at least 3 times a month? I would say twice a month. And how was this affecting his schoolwork? Objection calling for speculation, says Mr. Levin. The court sustains that. So Ms. Nahara continues. Did you have a conversation with him about how this was affecting his schoolwork? Mr. Levin objects, calls for hearsay, sustained. Ms. Nahara says, did you have a conversation with Lyle Menendez concerning how his father felt about his returning to California so often? Yes. And did he tell you how his father felt about him returning to California so often? Objection calls for hearsay, says Mr. Levin. Ms. Nahara says, goes to the state of mind, also an admission. Mr. Levin says it's irrelevant. The court overrules it. The witness says he was not pleased. Ms. Nahara says, when you say he was not pleased, who was not pleased? Mr. Menendez. When you say he was not pleased, what did you understand his displeasure to be? Ms. Towery now, objection as to what he understood. The court sustains that. Ms. Nahara says, what did Lyle Menendez tell you about his father's displeasure? Again, it was spring of '89. He was dating this young lady who was a few years older than him, and he was not happy. That he was dating her. He was not happy that he was dating her and that he was coming back to LA pretty often on an often basis. And when you say he was not happy that he was dating her, are you talking about Jose Menendez? Mr. Menendez, I'm sorry, Mr. Menendez was not happy that Lyle was dating her. Was he also not happy that Lyle Menendez was returning to California so often? That's correct. And did Lyle Menendez tell you anything about what his father wanted him to do about that? Be more specific, please, about what? Did Lyle Menendez ever tell you whether or not his father wanted him to stop returning to California so often? Yes, but again, it had to do also with the relationship with this young lady. What specifically did he tell you? That he didn't want Lyle, or Mr. Menendez didn't want Lyle to see her anymore. And did Mr. Menendez also not want Lyle Menendez to keep returning to California so often? Ms. Towery says objection, leaning, and court says sustained. And also clarify whether or not this is information the witness derived from conversations from Lyle Menendez or some other place. Ms. Nahara says, did Lyle Menendez tell you? Ms. Towery objects, leading. The court says, I haven't heard the question yet. Ms. Nahara says, now you said that Mr. Menendez said that he didn't want Lyle to see her anymore. Her, meaning Christy? Yes. Who told you this? Lyle mentioned it on a few occasions. However, Christy went more in detail. Okay, and when the defendant, Lyle Menendez, mentioned that on a few occasions, how did his response to that, how did he respond to his father? What his father had said. Ms. Towery says objection calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness. Sustained. Ms. Nahara says, what did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, tell you, if anything, about this? I'm sorry, how Lyle felt about. Ms. Towery says objection vague. The court says the objection is sustained as to the form of the question. Ms. Nahara says she's striking out a lot here. Ms. Nahara says, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, tell you anything about his father? His response to his father not wanting him to see Christy and not wanting him to return to California so often. He was not happy with his father's decision. And when you say he was not happy, what do you mean by that? Objection irrelevant as to what the witness means. Overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says he was upset. I mean, he enjoyed his relationship with Christy, and I think he wanted to spend more time with her. Ms. Nahara says, do you know if he broke up with Christy as a result of this or not? Yes. Yes, what? Yes, he broke up with Christy. And was he upset about that? Yes. He being the defendant, Lyle Menendez? Yes. And did he tell you anything specifically about that breakup? No, not really, just that he was upset, that he wasn't going to be able to see her anymore. And did he tell you that he was upset with his father? Yes. Do you recall, as you sit there, what words he used? What exact words he used to describe? Again, it was over 6 years ago. Now, did you see the defendant, Lyle Menendez, sometime before August 20th, 1989? Yes. And when was the last time you saw him in person prior to August 20th, 1989? It was over at the Menendez home on Elm Drive. I believe it was early August, and I had dinner with the family. Now, do you recall whether, as you sit there now, exactly when it was that you had that dinner before August 20th, 1989? Do you recall when it was? The exact date? Right. I believe it was 2 weeks prior to August 20th. And at one point, could you have thought it was sometime in July of 89? It could have been, again, we're talking over 6 years ago. Now, if that appeared in a police report, would that be closer to more accurate, or would it be 2 weeks before August 20th, 1989? Ms. Towery, objection calls for speculation on the part of the sustained. If you recall, objection sustained. As you as you sit there now, right now, what's your best recollection of the last time you saw the defendant, Lyle Menendez? Before August 20th? Before August 20th, 1989. Again, it was a few weeks prior to August 20th. And what did you do on that occasion? When I went over to the house, did you go over to the house? Go over to the house. Did you do anything there? I'm sorry. Did you do anything there? Yes, I met with Lyle. I went in the backyard, started shooting a few baskets, and they were going to sit down and have dinner in a few minutes. And he asked if I could stay and join them for dinner. His mom said fine, and I had dinner with the family. Now, while you were playing basketball with the defendant, Lyle Menendez, did you have a conversation with him? Yes. And did he talk to you about this father? Or about his father? Yes. And did he tell you about his father? What did he tell you about his father? That he was upset with him regarding an incident that happened at Princeton University. When you say he was upset with him, who was upset with whom? Mr. Menendez was upset with Lyle. Did he tell you why Mr. Menendez was upset with the defendant? Yes, I had to do with an incident where it had to do with an incident where there was a pool table. Oh my goodness, I can't, like, I don't know, struggling right now because maybe I need to take a break, or maybe I should stop here. Let me finish up the page or so. All right, so yes, it had to do with an incident where there was a pool table that was damaged and Lyle took the blame for it. And was this at Princeton University? Yes. And did he tell you whether or not his father was upset about the incident? Yes, he was upset. He, meaning Mr. Menendez, was upset. What did he tell you about Mr. Menendez being upset? That he was disappointed that it happened and that, he was basically going to be spoken to about it. And did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, tell you any other reason why his father was upset with him? Not that I can recall. Do you recall ever telling anyone that the defendant told you that his father was upset with him because he had been caught? Ms. Towery says, objection, leading. The court says, overruled. Ms. Nahara says that he being the defendant, Lyle Menendez, had been caught cheating on a lab psych and suspended for a year. Yes, but that was before that. That was, I believe it was a year before that, I believe. Did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, tell you about this during his conversation that he had with you on the basketball court? I don't recall. Do you recall ever telling someone that during this conversation the defendant, Lyle Menendez, mentioned that his father was upset with him because he was earlier caught cheating on a psych lab and suspended for a year? Yes, she was. I know about the incident, and yes, there was an earlier discussion about that. Was Lyle, the defendant, Lyle Menendez's father, upset with him for that reason? Yes. Did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, tell you this? Tell me that he was upset with him? Tell you that his father was upset with him? Ms. Towery says, objection, vague as to the time. Court says, well, let's first establish whether or not it was ever said, and then we can pinpoint the time. Objection overruled. He's so annoying. Ms. Nahara says, the question was, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez tell you his father was upset with him for this incident, this cheating incident, and the suspension? Yes, he did tell me that. Now, do you recall when he told you this? No, I do not recall. Could this have been brought up that day, the last time that you saw the defendant, Lyle Menendez, before August 20th, 1989, when you were playing basketball? Again, it could have been, I'm not sure. But you are certain that he, the defendant, Lyle Menendez, told you that his father was upset with him about an incident at Princeton. Is that correct? That's correct. Did you have dinner at the Menendez house that night? Yes. Now, when was going back to August 20th, 1989, were you at your home in the morning of August 20th, 1989? At some point in the morning, yes, I was. And I'm going to stop here because now they're starting to get into where he was that morning and being contacted by Lyle to be used as his alibi or their alibi at some point going to the Taste of LA. So they were supposed to meet up with him at the Taste of LA, and they never showed. They never got to meet up with him. So using him as an alibi was not a good alibi because they never even made it to where he was located. But we will save that for the next conversation. Thank you guys for reading along with me. Thank you for um, following this journey along with me because I think it's fascinating. Now that I've started with the whole trial, now I've got to see this to the end, and I want to see the second trial and how this plays out too. So we're in it. I'm in it for the long haul, and just unfortunately today, because I'm feeling lousy, we're gonna have a shorter episode, but we will pick right back up in part 7 with Perry Berman, continuing on his testimony. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye now.